My body cannot last. It's falling apart. Hell fool. No!
The Secret of Mana remake wasn't very good. Square themselves acknowledged that it was too cheap and set out to do better next time, and that's exactly what they've done. Trials of Mana still isn't a AAA game, maybe not even AA, but there's an A in there somewhere. It still uses very dated-looking assets, but this time there's a coherent style holding everything together. Instead of looking like a cheap, tossed-together mobile game, it looks more like a major release from a generation or two ago that's held up extremely well over time. I still think the original is a pixel art masterpiece, and the humble new visuals often fall short of it, but it mostly does justice to what a 3D version of Trials of Mana should look like.
The Sanctuary of Mana?
Wait, it's Mana? I'm just gonna keep saying it wrong. Leave your comment. The main character models were arguably the best looking part of the last remake, and they continue looking good here, but I spotted two problems in this scene. The king's cape is clipping through the throne and Belladonna's nails aren't red like the character art. Oh, and her giant tits are taking up the entire screen.
I used the souls of Bill and Ben in place of hers.
The game apparently takes place in a kingdom where everyone is allergic to bees and getting stung all the time, and so everyone's parts are too swollen to fit in their clothing.
You are positively brimming with magic!
This type of extreme fan service won't bother everyone, but it does make the game seem a little dated, harking back to a time when it seemed like games were made exclusively for and by 13-year-old boys. Form your own opinions, but I think they're taking us for a bunch of boobs.
I'd love to gobble them both up.
Tit-picking aside, there's far more ambition here than the Secret of Mana remake, with not only much more detail and care put into the graphics, but also an entirely new camera system. The top-down visuals are replaced with a standard third-person camera, and Square rose to the challenge of adding a wealth of new material to fill out the horizon. The world looks so much larger and less familiar now that it's like playing a new game, in the best possible way. The map isn't a one-to-one recreation and has a lot of alterations to improve the flow and visibility, but it's always faithful enough to be recognizable. The new camera also makes it easier to find doorways and make sense of the surroundings, as the original was sometimes needlessly unclear about things like this. Going hand in hand with the new camera is a new battle system that dramatically improves the combat. The main fault I find with the original is how slow and unresponsive attacks are compared to Secret of Mana, and the overhaul addresses that and then some. Dodging and jumping are now integral to avoiding damage and repositioning. Charge attacks have been added, and there are 2 attack buttons for chaining combos. The combos are very simple and revolve around pressing A a certain number of times before pressing X. One combo might spin attack all nearby enemies, while another will target just one with higher damage. I kind of wish they had gone full Bayonetta and added more moves and a dodge offset, but that would have complicated things too much. There's already too much to make sense of when the game starts. In addition to using all 4 face buttons, the shoulder button is used to bring up a menu for the tech attacks from the original, and pressing down also opens up a separate magic attack menu. It's disorienting at first, but the extra variety and speed added to the battles make the learning curve well worth it. There are only 2 problems with the new, but no, not those. One is that attacks miss very frequently and waste a lot of your effort. When this happened in the original, your gauge remained full so that you could try again, but in the remake, the gauge is drained whether the attack connects or not. It takes far longer to fill the gauge than before, so this becomes a major annoyance. There's a lock-on feature that doesn't seem to improve the accuracy of attacks and only succeeds in wobbling the camera all over the place, making it useless.
Don't move!
The other problem is that you can no longer see what your teammates are doing in battle, which makes it harder to know when they're taking damage. Normally this isn't a problem since your teammates will take care of themselves. Normally. But the Zenoa boss fight becomes a chaotic nightmare where your teammates will stand on spikes and die faster than you can heal them. I tried changing all of the AI settings to no avail. They still refused to dodge and rarely bothered to actually attack the boss. Between the bad camera, babysitting dumb AI companions, and the endlessly spawning little enemies, this fight is like a clusterfuck of all the things that can suck in a video game sucking at once. For anyone who hasn't played it yet, I'm happy to spoil that his weakness is water. Let your useless teammates die, spam water magic, and wail on them until the shockingly bad fight is over. There are 1 or 2 other pockets of turbulence like this, where a boss requires dodging a dozen attacks at once with nowhere to dodge to. In each case, there's a trick to avoiding this damage, but until you discover it, the fight will be random chaos. The originals could be frustrating too, but they're miles ahead in these few cases. It's a huge letdown that the game hit such low lows, because I support just about every other decision the developers made. Whenever a remake is criticized, the go-to response seems to be that I'm blinded by nostalgia or hate change. But I like changes when they're good and don't take things away from the original game, and Trials of Mana is full of them. The original had a lot of dead-end areas and empty rooms that didn't serve any purpose but to bloat the map, so the remake adds secret items and chests to give meaning to every little corner. This has great synergy with the new camera and jumping ability, allowing more exploring and even some platforming while hunting items. The volume of new collectibles and XP boosters does make the game noticeably easier than before, but it's a worthwhile trade-off if it makes the map more interesting and cuts down grinding. Objective markers have been added, and anything that might confuse the player has been streamlined. For example, an early sequence with Hawk trapped in a prison cell for a minute has been turned into a cutscene, and a few other potential stumbling blocks have also been automated. Often these kinds of changes water a game down and make it less enjoyable to play, but in this case it improves the pace without much downside. The original had a few sections requiring the player to talk to every NPC in town to find the way forward.
Guess we've gotta ask every Koro Poker Dom Perry's whereabouts.
And giving a marker to the one person you actually need to speak with cuts down the tedium. The slow-moving menus were another source of frustration, and thankfully those have been fixed as well. The storage system is now completely automatic. Out in the field you have free access to every item in your inventory, but in battle the stock is limited to just 9. It's a huge relief, and I don't think anyone is going to miss manually refilling after every fight. The item seeds can also be planted all at once rather than going through them one by one. There are some very convenient options to automatically sprint instead of having to click the stick and to skip the battle animations. These animations were overly elaborate and time-consuming in the original and ground the battles to a halt, so the ability to keep actively fighting while your teammates perform them is a major boost to the pacing. There's also a wealth of information about every facet of the gameplay, which Western players sorely lacked until now. The old game launched with a manual detailing all of the character traits and mechanics, which anyone playing an English-translated ROM missed out on. To Western players, putting together a team and choosing classes seemed like arbitrary decisions that could easily be made poorly and regretted later. The remake fully explains the choices and shines much more light on what the expected results should be. It also lets you reset the classes if you change your mind. Another feature that seems moderately useful is the option to play the intro sequences for each character in your team upon meeting them, filling you in on the details of their storyline from the start. This might be appealing for first-time players, but it kills the pace of the game to play 3 intros back-to-back, and it undercuts some of the motivation to replay with all 6 characters. The storytelling is probably the only area that doesn't feel much improved over the Secret of Mana remake.
Trials of Mana!
Oh, fuck you. They've made the sensible decision not to voice every NPC again, and I appreciate that simple exchanges are done through text now, not bewildering verbal assaults.
Whoa! I saw a white dragon up in the mountains! They're supposed to be extinct!
Lips are synced, and the acting isn't as likely to hit so bad it's good levels, but I did still manage to bag a few gems.
North of Laurent, on Light Castle Island.
Take that!
Take what?
That! Take that!
Nothing is being given!
I must go now. Take care, everyone. Farewell.
My planet needs me.
Their attempts to translate the quaint charm of animations and dialogue from a 2D game into 3D don't really work. It seems like it's gotta be all or nothing. Either do a radical modernization like Final Fantasy VII or keep it the same as the original. Trying to make the story more epic and dramatic on a low budget like this has awkward results. Thankfully, the rest of the audio has been given a far better treatment than last time. There are only a few of them, but the fully orchestrated themes sound incredible. The majority of the soundtrack is done with synths and guitars and follows Kikuda's original tracks very closely. There are no curveballs or wacky takes. It's all very competently done and sounds just like the original music but with modern quality. My preference fluctuates between the originals and the new tracks depending on the area, but the two are so close that there's never a major split. If you've seen my videos before, then you're probably thinking, but Neryl, surely you're going to find some way to complain about this soundtrack? Well sure, ideally I would have liked smaller scale orchestration with real instruments, just like Andrew from Orchestral Fantasy does. But I'm really just bringing this up as an excuse to show his channel again. Watch his covers! What else are you gonna do? Look up hentai of the characters?
Yes.
Oh, that's what you're gonna do,
can't
is
stop
it?
me.
In addition to competently bringing the game into 3D, Square also found the time to add new post-game content. The total resulting playtime for my first run was over 20 hours, which is pretty impressive for a game I'm well familiar with and that has 5 other stories to experience. It's the anti-Resident Evil 3, delivering a massive amount of content for a reduced $50 price. Trials of Mana is not Final Fantasy VII. It's not the most expensive or polished remake ever made, but it does look good, it sounds good, and it plays well, and it does something I haven't seen a remake do in a very long time. It innovates and modernizes while still feeling like the same game. Somewhere along the line, it became fashionable to do loose reimaginings that jettison nearly everything from the original experience. But Trials of Mana manages to hold on to most of the old qualities that made the original great and bring them forward along with the new. It reminds me of Resident Evil in that regard, which I still consider to be the best example for remakes to follow. The original is still well worth playing, especially since it's the only version with multiplayer, but it's hard to deny that the remake is much smoother and more enjoyable to play. It's impressive how big a turnaround this is from Secret of Mana HD. If it weren't for a few misfiring bosses, I'd consider this one of the better remakes I've ever played, so I'll do something different with the score this time. I'd rate the game about an 8.5 as it is now. But if I were to give it an imaginary score, reflecting a hypothetical update that fixed the bosses and enemy targeting, I could easily go as high as 9.5. I insist on playing both versions, but I can recommend this remake to newcomers as a fine way to experience the game. And if anyone from Square happens to be listening, I'd like to submit my audition tape for the next Mana game. This first character is sort of like a folksy prospector type.
Going out in the mines, are you? You're gonna need a hefty hammer. That'll be 12 gold.
This next character is someone who is confused about a light they saw in the sky.
What was that magical light just now? Am I just seeing things?
And now someone who is scared by seeing a ghost.
Like this spooky old temple gives me the creeps.
And now that scared person is hungry and just had a sandwich taken away from them.
Okay, what's the big idea?
So, Square, call me or email. I will be available.